generally drives that is price. And so, you know, if the price goes up, then suppliers are willing to supply more because it's more lucrative. And what causes price to go up is, at the end of the day, increased demand. So it's all intertwined, and we'll talk about that relationship and that interaction in a minute. All right, so quantity supplied is the amount that buyers are willing and able to sell. And then the law of supply says this here, but what it says is that as the price goes up, suppliers are willing to supply more. And I would, like we did on demand, I would write that down and, you know, put an asterisk by it, and we'll come back to that with the table and the graph. Oh, by the way, I hope you had a nice weekend. I forgot to say that. I meant to, and I just totally forgot. I had poker night Friday night. No, I broke even. I don't know. I bought pizza, so that was kind of a big expense that I didn't get reimbursed for. But you know, what are you gonna do? And then I broke even playing poker. You wanna know my secret weapon? Root beer. Because they all drink beer, and I just keep getting the diet root beers. And they think I'm drinking, so they don't say anything. And I just pound 3 root beers, and I'm sober. And they're starting to get drunk and make dumb bets.
But you still only broke even, so you know.
Yeah, I did. There was some big hands out there. So one guy won about $40. We paid $20 ante, so there's $120, $140 in the pot. And but then again, I bought pizza, which was, I didn't think they'd eat all of it, but it was so good they ate every last freaking scratch. I had no leftovers; they're all none. Supply schedule is the table that shows the law of supply. And then Sunday, went out on the lake. I have a little teacher boat. You know, went out on the lake and graded papers. It was great. Beautiful weather. Beautiful weather. Sit in the shade and the dog flops in and out of the boat. I just lay there. It was beautiful. So supply schedule is a table, that's the key, and that's on the exam that shows the law of supply. And so the table will be generated first as you collect your data. I mean, there's not a rule about that, but there's data that will be collected, and likely it'll end up in an Excel spreadsheet or whatever. And then you'll transfer that table onto the supply curve. So here's a supply schedule. There's a couple of important notes here. Notice that at a price of 0, there's 0 cones being supplied. Also, notice that you see the white kind of underlaying slide there? Just to show you how even the people who produce these books don't know what they're doing, is that this was it backwards. I had to fix this from the book because they screwed it all up. I had to redo it. And, you know, my first class I had students saying, I don't understand this stuff. It's backwards. It was like, you're right. So at a price of 0, they'll supply 0 cones. At a price of 50 cents, they'll supply 0 cones. Why is that? And there's an important undernote here that's really significant. Why is it that as the price increases, they don't start to supply, at least instantly? Why? Because the cost, it's all about opportunity cost. Somebody said the cost is more than the profit, and that's right. It's all about opportunity cost. And so think of it this way, and this is an important note because it plays into the other things we're going to do, is that what kind of company probably makes ice cream? A dairy, right? And a dairy, they probably do other things. They probably, you know, make milk and cottage cheese and yogurt and cream cheese, whatever they make, right? And what happens is there's these processes that go into making milk and processes that go into making cream cheese and yogurt, whatever. And there's capital equipment that is designed to, you know, slap out yogurt or slap out cheese, and it does whatever it does, it does. There's a piece of equipment that makes ice cream, whatever that is. And to transfer resources from making yogurt, that let's say the yogurt is selling at, say, 75 cents a container, they're not going to do it because the opportunity cost isn't high enough for them to give up the yogurt yet. If it's 75 cents and the ice cream is only 50, they won't bother. If it goes up to $1, then that 25 cents difference between the yogurt and the ice cream, is that enough to pay for the transfer cost? Enough to pay for moving it from one process to the other? Does that make sense? All right, so that's important. Yeah, go ahead.
So the price is dictating the supply, not the other way around.
The price, well, it's interplayed. I would say generally that's true, but there are other forces at work. So, and what causes a change in the price is demand. And we'll talk about that in a second, but generally the answer is yes, but not always. Okay, because there's other things that might, you know, cause the supply to go up without an increase in demand, such as, you know, a new process or a new technology or something like that. Okay, supply curve is a graph of the relationship that shows this law of supply. And again, the law of supply, as the price increases, suppliers are willing to supply more.
So on that though, if you get into more expensive ice cream, say that supplied more, or they want to produce more of it, but that's not necessarily true because when you get into more expensive, like just as a real life application, you get into more expensive ice cream, so you see less of it because of what is expensive is mass produced.
Right, I understand what you're saying. And what you're talking about, what kind of ice cream are you talking about?
I don't know, like maybe Cold Stones or something like that's a little higher than
Higher end,
Yeah,
or Haagen-Dazs or something
yeah,
like
something
that.
that's not like
Well, see, the thing about it, and you're right, but the thing about it is that for Haagen-Dazs or Cold Stone or whatever, is that there's this supply, and it is what it is, but they are faced with their own demand curve of people who like their ice cream for what it is. And so the demand curve is out here, which constitutes a little bit higher price, and this is just Haagen-Dazs. You know what I'm saying? And then so this would be, I don't want to insult anybody, but this would be, so this is $3 here, and they produce at Q1, and that's where their equilibrium is. What's a less expensive ice cream?
Western Family.
What is it?
Western Family.
Western, I don't know what that is. Is that a, like,
It's one kind of get in a bucket.
oh yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
It's not good?
It's
Cheap
Western Family.
Yeah, okay.
Kind of get for birthday parties.
Okay, so their price per cone, or their price per bucket.
It's like $5.
Okay, is let's go with $3 to match it. But here you're getting one cone for $3 or one bar. Here you're getting a bucket, and then they have their own quantity, whatever that is. Yeah. So you're talking about two individual supply curves here. Totally understand what you're saying.
Look at it kind of like they have the ability to make a greater supply so they can charge more, but they don't make as much of a supply because there's not as many people willing to pay that amount.
Yeah, totally. And if they increase,
Like
if they were to increase their supply to here, what would happen is you'd be producing at this much, but your demand at that price is only here, right?
Right.
And so you're producing up to Q3. And what you have right here, this would be a surplus of ice cream. You'd be making too much and it'd be sitting in the stores not doing anything. Inversely is that if you decreased your production down to here, at this price, P3, your demand would be here. And so you'd be producing this much, but your demanders would be demanding this much, and this represents a shortage.
After a while of that though, wouldn't your sales go down because people would just give up and move on to something else?
Yeah,
Find something else they like just as much.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, and you don't want to be, generating ice cream that nobody's buying, and you certainly don't want shortages because you could be selling more, So does that kind of answer? Yeah, good point. Okay, so here they are together. the supply curve and the supply table. And obviously they're corollary. You see as the price goes up from zero, people are starting to supply more and more. Price of 50 cents is $0, they're supplying 2 or 1. At a price of $1.50, they supply 2 and so forth. And that's a supply curve. Okay? Easy, huh? All right, so now we got to talk about movement along versus shifting of, and then that's it. Okay, market versus individual supply. This is actually one of the factors that shifts the curve, but just real fast, you don't have to write this down. So you have supply 1, P1, Q1. Let's say this is $1 just to keep it even. This is P1, Q1. This is some other supplier, And then the market looks like this. And so the price is $1, and they're selling three units here, assuming each of these is 1. So that's all that's saying, okay? It's just the market is the summation of the individual suppliers. And that's one of the principles that'll shift the curve out. We'll talk about that in a second. Okay. Ignore the title there, shifts in the supply curve, because that's really the next slide. This is change in quantity supply. That's what we're talking about. And I'll try to start putting it together right now for you so the whole picture is there. Okay, so change in supply. The only thing that causes a change in quantity supplied, change in quantity supplied is caused by one thing, which is change in price, which is caused by demand, yes. So a change in price causes the quantity supplied to increase. And so back to like maybe the ice cream place, they're supplying this much, however, let's say the price, just to give a number, is $1. And they're supplying 30 ice cream cones, whatever. Okay, so, and here's your demand curve for that ice cream. And they're in balance right now, so everything's going along fine. There's no surpluses or shortages, everything's fine. All right, so what would cause the demand curve for ice cream to shift?
The weather.
Okay, so the summer comes, so it gets hot outside. What does that do to the demand for ice cream?
It moves it up.
Which way does the demand curve move?
Yeah.
To the right. So the demand curve shifts to the right. So now we're at D1. And what do the ice cream suppliers do? They don't have new factories. They don't have new, they don't run out and necessarily hire a bunch of new full-time employees. They might get some part-time ones. But what do? Is they switch as the price of ice cream goes up above yogurt, above cream cheese, whatever. They switch resources over into making ice cream. And then they just move along their existing supply curve like this, and boom, until they find equilibrium again. Now the price is up to $1.25. That increase in price was caused by the shift in demand, and now they're selling 50 ice cream. Clear? Everybody okay with that? Okay, so movement along the supply curve, just like the demand curve, is caused by a change in price, which is caused by a shifting of the other curve, and we'll talk about that. So here's that graphically. Price goes from $1 to 3, and then the suppliers shift resources away. Another maybe example just to kind of hook into would be like Chevy. Is that, I know the Volt hasn't really made it yet, but assume that it has, or the Prius, which has made it, is that Toyota shifts resources away from making Tundras, which are kind of the diabolical opposites of the Prius in a lot of ways. Because the Tundra is a big gas hog and it's, a truck and all that stuff. And so what they do is as the demand for trucks, we'll kind of go through this. So this is the supply, this is Toyota trucks. And then this is Prius. And I'll show you how they work together. So Prius is here, here's the supply. Here's the demand for the trucks. All right, and so what's happening to the demand for the trucks because of the gas prices and all that stuff? What's happening?
It's shifting to the left.
Okay, so the demand curve goes down because people are trying to buy more fuel-efficient cars, equilibrium P-E-Q-E. And now they move down their existing supply curve like this, and now they're at P1, Q1, whatever. All right, so that happens. Now, those resources don't go away. I mean, they they have factories now that quit making trucks, but, and they would, if they were still in equilibrium, they'd still be making them, but the problem or the issue here is the demand for Prius has shifted to the right. So now we have D1, and here's their equilibrium, PE, QE. The demand shifts to the right for the Prius. They take these resources and move them over here, and now they're at new equilibrium here at P1Q. So there's really been kind of a zero-sum game there. There's not really huge jumps or decreases in productivity. It's just they're switching to what's more profitable. Make sense? Okay, so there's that. Now shifts in the supply curve, 4 things. The shift in the supply curve is the curve. So this is movement along the curve caused by a change in the price, caused by a movement of the shifting of the demand curve. Okay, and so a shift in the curve is caused by something other than price, and those 4 variables are next. Is it okay to erase this? All right, so those 4 variables are,
Hold on.
oh, sorry.
Okay.
Okay. So those 4 things are here. And we've actually already talked about the number of sellers is just that aggregation of the individual sellers. You get, 1 ice cream here, 1 here, 1 here, and the total is 3 for the market. So that's the last one. Input prices, that has to do with land, labor, capital. And so if, for example, the roof collapses on your Oompa Loompas, or you have a storm that wipes out your factory or wipes out your land, your crops, whatever, the input prices change. So the input prices would go up if you lose your labor force because the new labor force will be less efficient or untrained, blah, blah, blah. So they don't create as much output. As a result, per unit output is lower per worker, so your input prices go up. Technology, that's pretty easy. So some new process that stamps out ice cream faster, of course that shifts your supply curve to the right. Expectations, maybe we know that summer's coming, ice cream company, and so we know that even though the demand hasn't shifted yet, we know it's coming. And so we start increasing our production of ice cream, in the spring, getting ready for the summer. All right, so there's the expectations. Everybody okay with that? Moving ahead, going once, going twice. All right, so here's the curve shifting to the right or to the left, and caused by one of those 4 other things. And just to know, I mean, you guys know this, I think, already, but the supply curve S1, it shifts to the right, that represents an increase in supply. Shifts to the left, that represents a decrease. You know that, I think, but just to point it out. When you do the homework, I've said this before, I think one of the problems that I see a lot is students will say like this and whatever, and they'll say the demand curve went up. And it's like, I don't quite know what that means. Did they slide along that? Is that up? Is this up? I don't know. So be careful of that and make sure to differentiate. So in this case, the demand curve shifted to the right. In this curve, still the demand curve. In this curve, the supply curve shifted to the right. So make sure that you differentiate. Here's the 5 things we just talked about. The only thing that causes movement along the supply curve is a change in the price. Everything else causes the curve to shift. Okay, supply and demand together. Equilibrium, a couple of things, and then we'll go through what the test will look like. All right, equilibrium. Equilibrium is the point where supply and demand are intersecting. So D, S, here's P, E, and here's Q, E. So that's equilibrium. Everything's in balance, they're not producing too much, too little. Demanders aren't changing to the right or to the left, everything's in balance. And there's a couple of schools of thought, it just depends how you wanna look at it, is that some economists say that this is always the way it is. That when you take a snapshot of the supply and demand curves at any point in time, it's always in balance. And there may be forces that are pushing it one way or the other, but the moment you take the picture, it's in balance. And then there's others that say it's always, you know, if you take the picture and show it to your colleague, it's already out of balance again. So it just depends how you look at it. It's either accurate all the time or it's accurate none of the time. It's kind of a philosophical thing. Good? Okay, equilibrium prices here. I don't know that you really need to write all this down. I wouldn't. But just maybe draw your graph or something and then equilibrium prices here. It's the price at which supply and demand intersect. That's the way I do it, but whatever. All right, and then QE. Good? Couple folks already. All right, go on. All right, and then QE is, I knew it was, is this. And that's just the quantity at which price and, which supply and demand intersect. So, you can write it if you want, but I would just, equilibrium price is equilibrium quantity, that's all you need to know. Okay, so here's what the exam's gonna look like. This is just one question, and I'll go into there's like probably 4 or 5 questions we'll cover right now. On the exam, there's a question that says the movement from point A to point B is called what? A change, well, it is caused by a change in price, but what's it called? Movement along the demand curve, which is called change in quantity demanded. Yeah, so we know that, right? So change in demand is when the curve moves left or right, right? So movement along the curve, and this is on the exam. Let's do this. And the question is, what does this represent? You guys actually are right. I mean, it's a change in the price, a change in the demand. Yes, those happened before. But this movement right here is called a change in quantity demanded. Okay, so be ready for that. Be nice if you had a pause on it.
Oh, yeah.
All the dead time just take out, and all of a sudden it'll be 12 minutes long.
That would be a bad thing.
Okay. What the exam will look like, give me a commodity, any commodity at all.
Cold,
Huh?
cold.
Toilet paper.
Coffee. Sheep.
Sheep?
Tacos. So rare. Hotels.
Let's talk about
I like tacos. a weird thing. I've never done this before. Alright, supply and demand for tacos. We have P1, P1. Let me get these out of the way just so we're done. Supply and demand. And this is what you'll see on the exam, by the way. It will be just like this. Okay. So you'll be given these 4 charts, and then we're going to go through each of these processes. There's like, remember I said there's a coin, 2 sides to the coin, and then 2 parts to each side. This represents that. Okay, so tacos. Let's say the situation here in situation 1 is Cinco de Mayo is tomorrow. What's gonna happen?
The demand is gonna shift to the right.
Cinco de Mayo is tomorrow.
The demand is gonna shift to the right.
The demand will shift to the,
Right.
okay? So the demand will shift to the right. So now we're at D2. The suppliers, Taco Bell, whoever, what they do is they shift resources away from making enchiladas or something. Made that up. Alright, and the price of tacos is now at P2, Q2. Okay, so that's demand shifting to the right because of the holiday. Taco Bell gets accused of putting dog food in their meat.
Demand curve shifts to the right. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Okay, what happens? So, and which that did happen, didn't it? Or something to that effect, right?
Some guy some poopanines.
What?
Some guy poopanines. It was one of the workers literally crafted
No.
napkins. Yeah.
Oh no.
Seriously. I'll find you the news news
Oh
stories.
no. I don't want to believe that. I just don't. Okay, so somebody, let's go with what I said originally. I just can't stomach that. Somebody accused Taco Bell of putting dog food in their meat. What happens?
Demand shifts to
Okay,
the
so
left.
demand curve shifts to the left. All right, so they shift away from making so many tacos and shift into, something else like, well, it's the same product, but other products, they start getting their attention. So P2 and Q2. Some new taco making machine comes out that slaps out tacos twice as fast as a human being. Okay, supply curve shifts to the right, more efficient. All right, and then you and I, it's like, well, hey, we got more tacos for our money, right? Because it's more efficient. Tends to drive the price down to P2, and the quantity tends to go up to Q2 because it's more efficient for them to make. A freeze hits the corn crop. That makes, they supply the corn for the shells. So a freeze wipes out the corn crop in California that they use to make the shells. What happens? Supply curve shifts to the left because one of the input prices has gone up. All right, and then we just can afford less tacos, so we move along our demand curve. And now we're here at Q2, P2. There you go. So that's all 4 possibilities. On the quiz, or exam, sorry, you're going to see this. It'll be a different product. It'll be something totally different. And then what it'll be is these will be numbered 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then you'll be given situations underneath, it'll say, okay, this product is Coca-Cola. which of the four graphs represents the demand for Coke during, as summer comes and it gets hot out? One. Which of the four represents Coca-Cola as they introduce new Coke? Two. The demand fell way off. As they they get a rat in one of their cans and everybody knows about it.
Two.
Yeah, I would say so. I was just pointing to see if I could get you guys to say three, but I was thinking that one. But one of their raw products, sugar crops get wiped out in Hawaii. Some new process that allows them to can Coke much faster. Alright, so be ready for that. Everybody cool? Equilibrium price, equilibrium quantity. We'll do shortages and surpluses a little later on. It's kind of a more complex issue, and I won't give you any questions about it just yet. We'll cover that in its own detail. Any questions? Everybody okay? Yes, sir.
How come on one, when you said that Cinco de Mayo, it seems like a lot of things go on sale and everything's cheaper, but it says that the price goes up. Like avocados are a lot cheaper on Cinco de Mayo.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, you're absolutely right. And that would be, I think the suppliers, expectation that there'll be a lot of sales will shift their supply curve to the right. So what you're saying is they restrict the output somehow?
It just seems to be a lot cheaper. I mean, like, there's deals like the soda and...
Yeah, I think that might be here. And that Cinco de Mayo is coming, so they're increasing their production because they know the demand will be there. And so they increase their production, the supply goes way up, and then we just buy more stuff with our existing money because everything's on sale. That's kind of a guess. So there's some other things that could be going on there, but kind of a start. Okay, everybody good with that? Go ahead.
I can get you after class.
Okay.
I don't get it. I thought Cinco de Mayo was like number one.
Yeah, it is. But we were talking about how things go on sale. You know, different story. Yeah. Come up after class. We'll talk about it. Okay, so I'm gonna get rid of these. Now we're gonna switch to. Is there any questions about supply and demand at all? Going once, going twice. Definition will get us started here. Now, new chapter. What's up?
No, I was joking.
All right, elasticity is a measure of how responsive products are to change in the price. So back up a little bit, what causes change in price? Either the supply or the demand curve shifting to the left or the right, which causes the price to go up or down, which causes movement along the other curve. All right, elasticity has to do with how responsive we are to changes in price. That being said, let me give you an example. Give me any product at all.
Toilet paper.
Okay, toilet paper. I would say, well, toilet paper is probably relatively inelastic, so the demand curve is pretty steep. I'll tell you more about that in a second. Okay, so something happens and the supply curve shifts to the, let's say it just shifts this way. Something happens. The supply curve shifts this way, and the price ends up now at P2. All right. Notice that because this is fairly steep, because we can't or we don't want to live without toilet paper, what happens is the price goes up by quite a bit, but the demand only falls off by a little bit, or relatively a little bit. Make sense? Because we don't want to, even if the price goes way up, we're still going to buy it. All right, so here's another commodity that's really elastic, which would be something with a lot of substitutes like Coke. So that demand curve is really flat. Okay, and then if the price, something in the world changes and the supply curve shifts to the left, so the supply goes from here to here. What happens is now we slide up our demand curve and we reach our new equilibrium here. And now we're demanding this much, Q2 at P2. And notice that as the price went up just relatively a little bit, the demand fell way off. And the reason for that is because there's lots of substitutes for Coke. And if the price of Coke goes up even a little bit, we just switch over to Pepsi. Make sense? All right, so that's it. It's a measurement of the responsiveness and the change in demand due to a change in the price. Let me give you another example and then we'll call it. Well, we'll see. What time is it? Straight up 9:30? Straight down 9:30? 10:30. Okay, class is just starting. Okay, here is a hypothesis that's out there, and I've heard students have taken this to some of their other classes and put up a pretty good fight, and I hope you can too. Here's the demand curve for drugs, illegal drugs. Okay, here's the supply curve of illegal drugs. And here's the price in equilibrium, here's the demand. Are we fighting a war on drugs in this country? Of course. Who are we going after? Who are we trying to get? We're after the supply, right? We've got machine guns and border patrols and, boats in Florida that are, or helicopters that are machine gunning boats. I mean, it's not a joke, We're really after them. Are we having an impact?
No.
A little bit. Would you agree? I mean, every time we machine gun a boat, there's 20,000 less pounds of cocaine that makes it into the country, right? So we're having some impact. Do you agree? So let's say we're having a little bit of impact and we shift the supply curve like this because now the suppliers are scared to bring their boats. And so we shift the supply curve, the price goes up for illegal drugs, but because people are addicted, do they stop buying them?
Nope.
So what happens is the price goes up as we machine gun a boat, price goes up this much, but the demand only falls off by a little bit. All right, everybody with me? What we should be doing, in my opinion, is instead of fighting the war on drugs on the supply side, here's the demand, here's the supply. What's the anti-drug campaign right now? What is the slogan? I know it's way beyond just saying no. What is it now?
It's like, I am my own anti-drug.
I am my own anti-drug? No wonder kids are confused. Look who came up with that. What we should be doing is we should be taking all that money that we're using to buy helicopters to machine gun boats that are going from Cuba or wherever into the United States, building these great walls of Mexico, keeping the illegal drugs from coming into our country that way. What we should be doing is educating our population. We should be talking to kids who are in school about drugs and putting all that money and all those resources into the demand side. What would happen if we had a big effect on the demand side? Well, what would happen to the demand? Yeah, so the demand curve would shift to the left, right? Now the suppliers would obviously move down their existing supply curve, all right? So now it goes from P1 to P2. Demand goes from Q1 to Q2, right? And so the change in demand is probably somewhat similar, right? But what happens to the price?
They have to drop it.
Yeah, here it goes up. Here the price goes down. As the price falls, what's happening to the farmers in Colombia? Think about the milk I was talking about earlier, switching from ice cream to yogurt to ice cream. What happens to them?
They have to utilize another crop to make money.
Exactly, because now cocaine the demand has been driven down to the point where the price has fallen below some cusp where they're making money anymore. So they have to switch into the opportunity cost. They switch into their next best crop, which is coffee. or bananas, or whatever they grow. And so all of a sudden, we get a big surplus of coffee on this market. It means a Starbucks cup of coffee doesn't cost $5, just saying. And then also we get this real decrease in demand on drugs in this country. That's at the core of it. Here, shooting up boats doesn't do anything. In fact, if anything, the supply is getting, bigger part of the demand is getting stronger because people are going without. Here, we're teaching kids that you can do this without drugs. And that's the answer. Okay, now for the next job, just everybody's closing their books. Oh, no. I'm kidding. I would always like to leave on a high note. Goodbye.